Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 114. I know it's not June the 62nd, but that's what I wrote down. 2017. It's Monday. It's Monday late in the month of June, day 114. Okay, we should be able to finally get caught up today with the items I've had literally that took me 3 days. This will be the third day working just on the research I did over the past 2 or 3 days. That's how much information, how much news was breaking over the past 2 or 3 days. Friday was just an unbelievable news drop day. So we'll get this finished up for today, and then I'll be having some new things for you tomorrow. So let's go ahead and talk about what's going on today, or what has been going on and I'm just getting caught up on. First of all, something that's kind of been going on that's very interesting to look at is the Democratic National Committee Chairman, who was just recently appointed, Tom Perez, who's a real idiot and a disaster, by the way. It's unbelievable what you see happening to him, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. It seems now that everywhere he goes to give a speech to talk about the Democratic Party and what they're trying to do and this and that and the other thing, which he spends about 90% of his time in the speeches attacking Trump. But as we can see from these speeches, and it's getting worse and worse and worse, he is being heckled, shouted down, and literally booed off stage in speech after speech after speech. He cannot even get through the speeches. He finally had a meltdown a couple of days ago. He was giving a speech, and remember, these are Democrats. These are the progressive Democrats who are lining these convention halls where he's speaking and just taking over. I mean, they're literally booing him the entire time. He can't even hardly speak over the chorus of boos and heckles that he's getting. And every time he starts to talk about Donald Trump, they start booing even louder. They don't want to hear any more anti-Trump propaganda from Mr. Perez. What the progressives want to hear, they want to hear Mr. Perez talk about single payer, the environment, and various other issues that they are focused on. But Mr. Perez only wants to talk about Trump collusion, Trump's this guy, he's that guy, and he uses a lot of really foul language. I mean, I've never really seen anyone quite like him. He's a real lowballer. But his own constituents, the people that they are counting on to come and vote for them in 2018 and 2020, and this is another reason why I say they're going to get waxed, and that party is going to get wiped out, is because the head of their party cannot even go out and give speeches to their own supporters without getting booed out of the auditorium. Now, it got really bad in this past speech that I was watching. The boos got so loud and Perez got so frustrated that his security guy came over at some point, and Perez actually stepped off the side of the stage, because he couldn't even be heard over the chorus of boos and heckles. And then this, I don't know who this guy is, but he's like a security guy, I guess. He steps up over to the microphone and just basically hollers at the audience in the microphone. And he says, okay, I'm about to drop some foul language on you. This is a quote. He steps up to the microphone and he screams into the microphone, hey, shut up. And then they scream even louder. And then he goes, sit down and shut the fuck up. At which point they really went berserk, and Tom Perez had to be escorted out of the building by security, and the place went completely nuts. So this is the state of disarray that the Democrats are in. The head of their party cannot even go out and give speeches anymore to their alleged supporters, because their supporters are so angry with them. And now, instead of conducting themselves in somewhat of a professional manner, they are instead attacking their own supporters now and dropping some really nasty language and being very abusive to them. You know, you would think that Tom Perez, after this is happening to him day after day after day, no matter where he goes in the country, even there's nowhere he can go. The progressives obviously have some sort of an organized campaign. This can't be just purely people showing up. This has to be extremely organized by somebody on the progressive wing of that party, because, I mean, they are giving this man pure hell, and they should. And you would think that Perez and the people at the DNC would sit down and say, we're getting hammered by our own people with these things. Maybe we should listen to their concerns. Maybe we should actually address their issues. Even if you don't think or you don't support single payer, which they don't, the corporate Democratic Party does not, even if you don't think that making the environment your top issue because you don't think it'll work in the Midwestern states or in the South or what have you, it seems like Mr. Perez would address these issues with his supporters and say, hey, I know what you guys want, but let me kind of explain to you what we believe here at the DNC. But he doesn't do that. He just spends the entire time that he's given a speech talking down Trump, and the progressives are sick of it. It doesn't work. It has failed, but they don't seem to know anything else to do. So Tom Perez, the Democratic Party, of course, not only are the Democrats, former Obama administration crony Democrats, turning on each other to save their skins from possible legal repercussions, prosecutions, and possible jail and fines, they are now turning on their own supporters, as their own supporters are turning on them. It's like reminds me of the food fight scene in Animal House. it's just completely coming unglued, folks, and it's extraordinary to watch. And Donald Trump has a Twitter account, and he is surely using it, and it's just amazing. Now, here's another issue that's been popping up, and a lot of people are talking about. Reported this story coming to us from The Hill. FBI investigation on Jane and Bernie Sanders for possible fraud. Now, in case some of you are not familiar with this, basically, the FBI is alleging that that Jane Sanders and Bernie falsified loan documents while she was the president of Burlington City College. This school was closed after going bankrupt and failing to meet academic standards. The school faced financial difficulties during Sanders' tenure from 2004 to 2011, and they claimed that they had $2.6 million in donations, but only had raised $676,000, according to the records, putting the college in bankruptcy. And of course, some donors had gone to the FBI, and also it appears that Bernie Sanders himself had used his position as a senator to apply a little pressure on the bank to make the loan, which the school was not able to make payments on, which resulted in them having to go bankrupt. And also in the document where they filled out the loan application form, Jane, apparently the president of this college, claimed that they had raised about $2.6 million, when in fact they'd only raised $676,000, which raises the question: did she lie on the bank application in order to help get the loan, or did they actually receive $2.6 million? And if they did, then why did only $676,000 end up going toward the school, and where is that other $1.5 million? What did Bernie and Jane do with the $1.5 million? Of course, and to make things even more humorous, Bernie Sanders and Jane Sanders, who are out there campaigning on wanting free college education, in the process of all this stuff that they were doing, raised tuition rates at the school by 400%, taking yearly tuition rates from $6,000 to over $20,000 a year. So they're out campaigning, talking about how they want free education. At the same time, Jane and the school that she was president of is raising tuition rates by 400%. So basically what happened here is that Jane Sanders is president of Burlington College. At some point, she and some other cronies, and I guess that includes her husband, Bernie, decided they wanted to expand the school, and so they wanted to purchase a piece of real estate and build a new building there. In order to get the money to do that, they needed to come up with some cash, some dirty cash. And so they launched a fundraising drive. And in the process of that fundraising drive, they claimed that they raised $2.6 million. But we're finding out that a lot of those claims of that money that was pledged did not actually exist. That they did a fraudulent job of presenting the way that the money would be paid. They were claiming they basically had the money in the bank, or the money was as good as in their hand, when in fact a lot of these donations were not hard commitments. They were only verbal or oral type of commitments that were made. Some of the commitments were commitments that were made by people saying, yeah, I'll give you this much now, but and upon my death I'll give you more. So this money was going to be paid out over time. But they made it appear on the bank loan application as if this money was essentially in their hand, which it wasn't. In fact, if it was in their hand, they probably wouldn't have needed the loan now, would they? And once they realized that the money wasn't coming in and the bills weren't getting paid, they could not meet the obligations of the loan, they decided to take drastic measures by raising the cost of tuition by 400%. At the same time, it appears that in order to nudge the bank into giving the loan, which they were hesitant to give because of the financials of the school, it appears that maybe Bernie Sanders made a few phone calls to the bank president and maybe attempted to lean on him and persuade him or offer him something that would cause him to approve a loan which he did not want to approve based on the financials of the school. So now it appears that there's a active fraud investigation into Bernie and Jane Sanders. The school's now bankrupt. It is closed. And a lot of victims in this case. And it shows you what the socialists are really about. So there's the Bernie and Jane story, and that will continue to play out. That may throw a wrench into the spokes of Bernie leading a new party, or Bernie running in 2020, or anything else other than running laps around the prison yard. Circa News has got a story out that gives a slightly different spin on these letters that were sent out. As you know, it was being reported by The Hill that the two people discussed in the letter, or the email, the letter that's based on the email that James Comey was talking about in the closed session, where he said, hey, I got this email, showed it to Loretta Lynch. It's these two people, high-level politicians, Democratic politicians, talking about how you were going to blow off the Hillary Clinton investigation and make sure it didn't go anywhere. And The Hill was reporting that conversation took place between Debbie Wasserman Schultz and this woman who was the head of one of the heads of the Hillary Clinton campaign, who we learned in the Podesta emails was put in as the token Latino. That's why they put her in that position. They needed a token Latino at the head of the Hillary Clinton campaign to cover all their liberal bases. And of course, this woman has now been sent one of the letters, and she is going to have to respond, I assume. But Circa News is reporting the story slightly differently. Circa News is reporting that the email that Comey was shown, that Comey showed to Lynch, was between Debbie Wasserman Schultz and a man named Leonard Bernardo, who is part of a Democratic think tank and a group that was paid millions of dollars in the Clinton campaign for doing fundraising or whatever election activities. That this Mr. Bernardo is either head or high-ranking member of this organization, and that the discussion actually was between, the email discussion was between Loretta Lynch and this gentleman, Leonard Bernardo. And it was suggested in this email that Lynch had assured Amanda Renteria, the woman we're talking about, the token Latino at the Clinton campaign, Amanda Renteria, that the FBI investigation would not go too far. So it's a slightly different spin on the same story. This, instead of it being a direct conversation between Wasserman Schultz and Renteria, Circa is claiming that the conversation was actually between Debbie Wasserman Schultz and this man Leonard Bernardo, and they were talking about the fact that someone at the DNC had assured Amanda Renteria, the token Latino of the Hillary Clinton campaign, that the FBI investigation would not go too far. Now, following that, the Washington Post did a story in defense of that, saying that they believed it was probably planted by the Russians, that the email was planted by the Russians. James Comey was then asked about this in his hearing, in the open hearing, about that particular story, and James Comey said it was not true. James Comey said that the story about this conversation was planted by the Russians. Comey says, no, that wasn't true. Basically what happened is that as the FBI was doing their investigation into Russian hacking, and they were looking at some things, they stumbled across this email themselves. The FBI are the ones who found this email. And when this email was found, it was given to James Comey, at which point he went to Attorney General Loretta Lynch and said, hey, I think you need to read this email. It's between, according to Circa, it was between Wasserman Schultz and this Leonard Bernardo. The Hill says it was between Wasserman Schultz and Renteria herself. But regardless of who it was definitely Debbie Wasserman Schultz. They both agree on that. Whether or not it was Bernardo or Renteria is probably irrelevant at this point. The fact of the matter is, the point is that James Comey debunked the idea that the Washington Post story was stating that it was a plant by the Russians. He says, no, that definitely the Washington Post story is wrong. It wasn't anything planted by the Russians. This was a legitimate email that we discovered through our investigation. And so James Comey has put the kibosh on the Washington Post story, and we know that this email is right now either the committee that's investigating this has the email, or it is in the possession of the Department of Justice, and they are trying to get a hold of this email themselves. So anyway, this is basically what's happening. Tom Perez, the DNC chairman, cannot even get to a speech without being heckled and booed off stage anywhere he goes, no matter where he goes in the country. The Democratic Party is clearly split. It's eating itself. It's falling apart. It's in a disaster zone. And we have the Hill letting us know that Barney and Jane, their crime spree may be coming to an end, as they are now under FBI investigation. And Circa News telling us a little bit more about that email. And James Comey debunking the Washington Post story that it was a fraudulent email planted by the Russians. In fact, the email is true. It did happen. And it's going to be and it was the focal point, really, of the letter to Loretta Lynch. Obviously, they talked about the fact that she had asked James Comey to change the characterization of his investigation. But the real obstruction of justice is in this particular email exchange, where it is stated that whether it was directly to Renteria or whether it was about Renteria, stating that they had been assured that by Loretta Lynch that the investigation to Hillary Clinton's emails would not go too far. She would put the kibosh on it. So, this is what we learned today. TowerGate, day 114. Monday, 2017. Some Monday in June. I know it's not the 62nd. Probably the 26th. I don't know. I'm all confused. But anyway, that's what's going on today with TowerGate. So this is information, the final part. I had these notes, 3 days worth of videos, worth of notes from things to cover that just occurred from Thursday and Friday of last week. So now that we've covered all of that, we'll be into some fresh information tomorrow, and we'll see what is breaking today, and I'll be covering that tomorrow on TowerGate. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. See ya. Bye.